Hey, you guys, what's up? You have found your way to the I'd Rather Anime podcast. I'm Chelsea,
And I'm Ben.
and this is your place to catch up on all things anime, new, old, current, whatever. So, hope you guys are ready for this because it's been a while since we have recorded an episode.
Yeah, it's been even longer since we actually released one.
Very true. Very true. So, as it stands, we are in the big old year of 2024. We have just finished the first season of the year, so the winter season of
Yep.
anime. And there's some hits, some misses. We have actually been binging everything. So we only watched a couple of things week to week. Like we watched Free Ren and Shangri-La week to week, but for most of it, we just kind of waited until it was over. And that was 100% my decision.
And you know what? It was a good decision. Honestly, I like the fact that I took 2 days off of work just to, we could just sit down and binge and relax anime at the end of the season.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, that's not what you took the time off of work to do. It's just
I
what we did while you were off.
I know, but since we did it, I might do it every season.
I mean, it's definitely something to consider.
It was fun, but yeah. So, just to start off, Solo Leveling. I don't think it was as good as it should have been. I think it should have been like an 8 for the anime adaptation. I think it ended up being like a 6. How you feel about it?
I don't know. I don't feel like it was inherently bad. I just feel like it wasn't good the way that it needed to be. It didn't deliver on what I watched the anime for. You read the series more recently than I have.
Yeah,
And so it was fresher in your mind or whatever. But when I was watching it, it was almost anime only for me because I don't remember what happened at the beginning. Because for me, most of what I remember about Solo Leveling happened after Arise and everything that was like in between. Because for me, that's where the story really picked up. So, slight spoiler alert, I guess, if you haven't watched it. But I didn't, I feel like it was a wasted effort in all honesty because the way it is currently, as someone who, even though I knew that there were other things building up to Jeju Island or whatever, I don't remember any of the people who were introduced in that section of the webtoon or the manga, whatever you wanna call it.
mhm.
I don't remember those people. Like, I know that they were there, and I know that they play a role in that particular arc, but I didn't remember who they were. And then so watching it in the anime and never having that fully explained, like, who they are and how
Right.
they pertain to this particular story, and just having it kind of thrown randomly in, it was just kind of like, who are all these people? Like, I felt like Patrick in that meme where he's like, "The people others," right? Like, who are all of you people? You know? And it was just like, it took away from what I was there for because the entire first part of Solo Leveling is about him solo leveling. Like, that's it. That's what it's about. It's about him, getting stronger and him realizing the world. But the thing is, I feel like what this anime failed to do well is the fact that the reason you don't get those other characters is because while you know that there are S ranked characters or whatever, you know that there are stronger people. By showing the other characters who are stronger than Jinwoo, it's just like you take away from all of his growth, all of his feats. Like he was an E rank, he couldn't even defend himself. So it's just like he gets stronger. So, but before you can even have a chance to like celebrate that or revel in that, it's like you're showing someone else just absolutely bodying an even stronger creature. And it's just
Yeah.
like, why would you show that right now? You're
Why would you
taking away from his win.
why would you show S rank hunters right off the bat or whatever when Jinwoo doesn't even really interact with any S rank hunters for like several seasons worth of content,
Well, it's
and
not.
you belittle his accomplishments because like you don't know what the gaps are or whatever, and it's just like even for example like in the beginning, Juhi, the B ring killer girl, it's just like some people were like, "Oh, she must suck because clearly she's not like regrowing this guy's body or whatever. She must be a terrible healer." And it's like, no, she's a B rank killer. She's actually pretty decent. But they showed you an S rank killer, one of the few on the whole planet, right off the bat, and it just like undermined everything she was capable of.
Yeah.
And it's like they do the same thing with Jin Woo's character. It's just like
all of the power scaling is really messed up and it's hard to appreciate it from the way that they showed it. There's also a lot of cuts to irrelevant information where it's just like, you don't
Yes.
need this information right now. So the world building was really kind of skewed in a sense of this isn't satisfying because, like, when Jinwoo's in the dungeon, I don't care about what else is happening. I don't care about any ancillary conversations. I don't care about characters who and here's the biggest problem with Solo Leveling, as far as I can see, is you're introducing these characters and none of them interact with Jinwoo, and Jinwoo is the main character. This story is about him. There is this and I feel like they took an approach like they did for, like, My Hero Academia, where they were trying to be like, "Oh, there are other people and all these things ultimately play together, and you need to see what other people are doing outside of the main character." But the thing is, part of the reason why I hate My Hero Academia is because it does that. The world is too big, and it doesn't feel like Deku's story for the most part anymore. And I feel like they tried to do that with Solo Leveling because it's like you have the guild master, then you have these other guilds and what they're doing, and then the thing that was, like, reprehensible though was when he was in the dungeon fighting with, the other dude who's ultimately gonna become his business partner, and then they
Mhm.
cut to those girls having tea.
Oh, yeah, they cut to 3 random girls having tea, they don't have names, they had no relevance, and just so I could spout out random information that was completely unnecessary at that point in time. It was just like
And it
it
was
was bad
still
enough when you were doing it with characters that are gonna be relevant later, but it's even worse when you do it with characters that are irrelevant later, and then you use them to repeat information that you already said.
yeah. And it was just kind of like, what was the point? And I understood what they ultimately were trying to do is they were trying to get that effect of, other people are saying things and Jinwoo is living it, like what happens in the dungeon stays in the dungeon while he's going through that and other people acknowledging that reality, right? So I get what the intent was, but the execution was really terrible because at the end of the day, Solo Leveling is about Jinwoo going into the dungeon and getting stronger, better, cooler, faster. This is an underdog story. You are here for Jinwoo and you want to see him on the come up. And they butchered it so badly that there is not a single episode that you could just watch straight through. Like, in order to get the most out of Solo Leveling, you would really need someone to go in and do like a super cut and take out all of the ancillary stuff, and the issue that I have with that is if you did that, you would only have like 3 or 4 episodes worth of content. And my whole thing is like, you could have gotten through so much more of the story had you not forcefully inserted things that didn't need to be there. Because Arise really could have been like episode 5, 6, 7 at the latest.
Yep.
And then you could have gotten more into it because after that is when the story really starts to pick up. When people start to recognize him and his name starts being in conversations and he's not necessarily completely in hiding the way that he was before. After his mom wakes up, that's when things really start to kick off for him.
Yep.
And it's just like you completely butchered it by doing some forceful setup for things that, let's say you do get multiple seasons, right? At best, Jeju Island is not coming until season 3, most likely season 4 if they keep this kind of pacing. So it's like
Yeah.
you're inserting a bunch of things that you aren't necessary, and then you have the audacity to include a recap episode in the middle of the first season.
It's just like, we've only had a couple episodes. We do not need a recap.
We
Like,
don't need a
why are
recap.
you wasting time and resources? I understand if you had production delays, then you should have just taken a break week. There was no reason to do a recap episode like 6 episodes in. That
No,
is insulting.
especially when you're not steam running the content. There's not a lot that happened between the first episode and the recap episode. There was not enough that you needed to recap it.
Yeah.
Because even the fact that the inciting incident for Solo Leveling, when he gets trapped in the double dungeon or whatever, the fact that that was spread out over 3 episodes is evident of the fact that, like, you had way too much ancillary stuff shoved in here.
Yeah, because it's just like, and it really messed up the pacing because first of all, they should have did the first 2 episodes together at the same time. If it's anything that Freerin dropping the first 4 episodes at one time and Ochinoko having basically a movie for its first episode
Yeah.
has shown us, it's just like you need to get all the relevant parts to the start of your story out at the same time.
Well, I'm not gonna
And
say relevant, but it's the essential effect of a prologue. if the main story is about this thing and this is just context that you need to know. So, like with Oshinoko, it's not about that pop idol story. So, there was no point in having 3 episodes of her being alive and doing all the things because it would confuse you as the watcher thinking that the story is about her and it's not. It's about her kids, and her absence is what defines the entire of that anime.
Yeah.
Same thing with Frieren. It's like Himmel's absence is what defines Freeren's entire journey. And you need that. So it works essentially as a prologue. We're going to give you the setup, but we're not going to hold you here for so long that you get a misunderstood concept of what this anime is
Story is
really
about.
about.
Mhm.
I feel like with Solo Leveling, the double dungeon isn't necessarily, "Oh, you need this context," because it is a part of his journey that you need to focus on because he is the protagonist. The problem is they started it off with Jeju Island, and I don't know if we have enough clout, I don't know who needs to hear this, but one of my least favorite things is when an anime starts out with irrelevant action scenes and it has no context and no significance for the rest of the story. Because here's the thing, Jeju Island is not something that needed to be the opening point. Like, even the failed attempt at it, that was not something that you needed to see to understand it because Jinwoo also has no context for that actually happening. So have giving the watcher or the reader or the consumer more information than your main character is completely pointless when that information doesn't become relevant and it's things that he is going to have to figure out for himself later on.
Yeah, I completely understand. I feel like a lot of people online are defending it, saying like, "Oh, it's better because like in the manga, it's just like if people weren't around Jinwoo, then they basically didn't exist." And it's just like that's how stories are told. You realize that, right? For you in your personal life, if you haven't met somebody yet, they are irrelevant to
They
you.
don't exist.
They don't exist. That's how stories are told. That's how you have focus and direction. And it's just
And
like them adding in all these things that aren't relevant to Jinwoo just makes it all irrelevant. So they're padding it and it messes up the pacing because it's just like, even if you were going to split up the double dungeon thing into 2 separate episodes, at the very least, you should have been able to end on the smile, you know?
yeah.
At the very least, there are a lot of other points that they just, especially in those first few episodes, where they just clearly did not hit their marks on where they were supposed to end the episode. And it was just like you had time to get to those marks that would have been perfect spots to leave off.
Yeah, and the thing that I think from a storytelling aspect that people are missing is that the world is supposed to feel small for Jinwoo because he is literally being crushed under the weight of it. He's an E rank hunter. He has a sister that he's trying to support. His mom is in the hospital and she's essentially on life support and dying. And there isn't much that he can do. Going into the dungeon and risking his life is the best he can do because it's the only way that he can afford to keep his mother alive, but he's not good at it. He's not making enough money to survive. So his world is incredibly small. It is go to the dungeon, make enough to survive, try to walk out of it. His world is literally the D-rank hunters who go into these dungeons with him. His world does not include a lot. And it doesn't get bigger until he gets stronger. And it starts with the women at the hospital who, when he starts to physically change, start to notice him. And even then, he's completely obtuse to it because he's just like, oh, the nurse must just care about my well being. That's weird, but cool. I can respect it. She's just being a professional. He completely overlooks it. And it's not until he recognizes that he's actually getting stronger. And he recognizes that he can no longer keep this a secret and he starts to realize that he can do something to really support his sister and his family, that his world starts to get bigger, but it is his choice to do so and him being forced into new situations. That is when his world expands. And you following his journey also helps you as a reader not be overwhelmed and bombarded with a bunch of information that is not relevant yet. And it keeps it from being repetitive because I guarantee you, if Solo Leveling gets all the seasons that it needs to do the entire adaptation of the manga, right? That would be a beautiful thing. But the information that you got in season 1 about Jeju Island is not what you're not going to remember any of that information
No.
when you get to whenever they actually do it. which makes it repetitive. And it also messes with the pacing because assuming it does get 4 seasons or it gets 5 seasons, well, now they've completely butchered the actual source material by forcing things that don't come until much, much later down the line
You take
into
away
the
the impact.
beginning of it. So you take away the impact, but now you have to find something else to fill the gaps in the spaces where you cut those things out because you included them elsewhere. So now you have space and you have nothing to fill it with because it's not like you can take things that happened in the very beginning and stick it at the end where the content was supposed to go originally.
I mean, they're probably just gonna replay and repeat that same information when it was unnecessary. And what really upsets me about it is that you already have the manhwa for a template. The manhwa was very good, it was well received, and until it got near the end, there were almost no complaints for the solo leveling manhwa. The same cannot be said of the light novel. The light novel did not blow up until after the manhwa did, or whatever. The light novel isn't even called solo leveling, you know? But the manga, they took their time and made a good adaptation of the story, and then you went back on the anime and just kind of reverted it unnecessarily. And it's just like, it's a shame because like the animation for Solo Leveling is great. It does have the scenes that it needs to have. It just has all this extra stuff that is really weighing it down and belittling the story.
And I think it's just so it also just takes away from it. That's the thing that I don't like because as the watcher, it's frustrating, especially watching it week to week. It might be a different experience when you binge it, but watching it week to week, it's just kind of like, why are we wasting minutes in the guild master's office listening to him take a phone call? I'm not saying that it's not necessary or that it didn't show up in the manhwa. I'm saying that from a person who's watching the anime. It's like, I came here for a very specific reason, and you're giving me a phone call to another character that you've given me no context for an operation that the main character knows nothing about and will know nothing about for
So,
many, many months,
mhm.
possibly years in world.
Yeah,
S
there are several arcs before we get to that arc. And it's just like the manhwa, it brought things up as they were relevant, which is how you should bring things up. If you bring things up before they're relevant, then it doesn't really help. You can foreshadow by bringing up things in context, but just randomly throwing things out there because it's just like, even though you've watched the whole season, do you know who Choi is?
No,
Because they hardly said his name and he was never relevant enough for you to remember. But for some reason, he was in almost every episode. Same thing with Cha Ha-in. And I think Cha Ha-in is a great character. However, there was no reason for her to be in this first season at all.
no,
It was unnecessary. And it's just like they added all this little extra fluff or whatever, but it didn't add anything to the story.
no.
So it's just like,
And even if it added in-world context for power scaling, it was introduced at the wrong time. So seeing the guild master training with one of his subordinates while Jinwoo is struggling to get stronger, but he is getting stronger, you undermine the fact that he's doing something he's not supposed to be able to do. He's actually leveling up. But then on top of that, you diminish his wins because his wins are hard fought for, and then you cut to the guild master just casually demolishing somebody else for no reason. It's just like, we don't know who these people are. We don't know how they relate. They've never had any interaction with Jinwoo that we can see. And you're just cutting to them training. Why? What does this
yeah,
add? What does this show? Why do we need to see this? And it feels pointless, especially when you spend 3 to 4 minutes on it, which again, that may not seem like a lot of time, but when you are watching week to week, and you really only have 20 minutes of
yeah,
content.
that's like a fifth of the episode.
It's like you're spending a fifth of the episode and you're wasting your animation budget on a training with characters who realistically don't even have names.
Yeah.
Not yet. You know, one is the guild master, you have no idea the name of the other person.
Yeah, it's just like if you haven't read the source material, then you don't know who these people are and they are completely irrelevant. And it's just like there's so much irrelevant time in each episode that it's very harmful to the story.
Yeah. Because if I was anime only, I would not continue watching Solo Leveling. I would have dropped it after like the fourth episode.
Yeah, because it doesn't display how good the story actually is and what it can be.
And it doesn't make any promises that it delivers on because it makes you feel like, "Oh, this character is still super weak. There's no point rooting for him." And on top of that, he hides his abilities. So it's just like if you're not making him an overpowered character who leans into his abilities, and we don't actually spend a whole lot of time with him. Every time you see anything of relevance with him, it's being cut and chopped up with irrelevant things. And then we don't get any context for what's actually happening. Like the S rank hunter dude who was like trying to basically scout the other S rank hunters from different guilds or whatever. It's just like, why was that necessary to show while Jinwoo is fighting the giant centipede under the city?
Yeah, it's just like the timing of it is wrong. And even if you did want to show that or whatever for extra world building or whatever, all right, show that one thing, that one little nugget. But it was just constantly every episode with a bunch of these things that were just forced in there that are irrelevant. Because it's just like, at least you can say that, hey, them trying to draft another hunter or whatever for that company has to do with a character that at least met Jinwoo or whatever, you know?
But
But
even then, he hadn't met Jinwoo yet when we got that context. You don't have get that context until literally the last episode. So the something that they're showing you in episode 4 isn't put into perspective until episode, what, 12 or whatever. And it's just like, if that was the case, why not just reference it? Why actually show it on screen instead of just referencing it in that moment when you see his business partner going to dinner, because at that point, that's the only time that it becomes relevant.
yeah, because in reality, you could have skipped all those scenes and he could have said exactly what he said in that scene and it would have been perfectly fine. There was no need to show old dude going to his office. There was no need to say old dude leaving the office. No need to show her at the track. No need for her to tell her boss about the business card and her
Mm,
not leaving. All that stuff was irrelevant and it could have just hit the sentences that he already said about finding other hunters would have been perfectly fine.
would have covered everything, so
Yeah.
overall, I would give Solo Leveling, like, a strong 4 of 5 if I was really reaching, simply because the animation is definitely worth it, and the source material is really good. Like, it's
Yeah.
solid. And most of the complaints that I have come from the fact that from a storytelling aspect, I don't vibe with it. I don't vibe with all the extra things and the pacing of it, and just the fact that it feels like it's being handicapped and kneecapped constantly, and it's really not fun, and I think that's the thing that kinda disappoints me the most is that I was looking forward to this, and the things that I was looking forward to, I feel like were just kneecapped so hard
Yeah.
that it was just like, "This isn't fun for me," because now I'm like, "Who is this? Why are we getting this right now?" Like, it's confusion. I
Yeah.
feel like to really enjoy
Confusion is
it,
never fun.
no, confusion's never fun. Having questions is one thing, but being legitimately confused is not enjoyable. So, I think if someone ever did, like, a supercut of all the times that he was in the dungeon and took out all of the
If it
extra stuff, I would actually really enjoy it.
if they only included scenes with Jinwoo and that were relevant to Jinwoo, then it would be a good story just like the manga is. Now, the fights, they were good except for when they cut away from the middle of it
Mhm.
or whatever.
'Cause
The
it cuts the
music was
tension.
great, but it's just like you're cutting the tension, you're cutting all the things that really make it hype, and you're just bringing it all down. And it's just like, why are you stamping down the story? You're stomping on it, you're mushing it down, and it's just like that's unnecessary. Just let it flourish and be what it is. And then what really upsets me is that they already have a great template. The reason why the story is being adapted in the first place is because Solo Leveling, the manhwa, was the most popular manhwa in the world, or whatever. It probably still is the most popular one in the world. Crunchyroll had to move mountains to pay for this themselves, because they don't have a deal with whoever is the distributor because it's not Webtoon or whatever for Solo Leveling or whatever. But they did all that so they could adapt the story because they knew people wanted to see the story adapted. And then you just like don't adapt the story from the material that made it famous.
Yeah.
And it's
And I think that's the thing. It's like you said, there are so many different adaptations of there's a light novel, there's a manhwa, and the manhwa is adapted into an actual manga that you can go to literally any bookstore and
that's
pick
true.
up.
You can go to Barnes and
So
Noble and get a manga version of Solo Leveling. That shows how ridiculously popular this show is.
so and the thing is, I always give grace because I'm like, if you're adapting something from a light novel, there is always going to be a level of you have to take something that's in a written medium and put it in a visual medium, and that's a different kind of pacing. So I get that. But when you have a manhwa, the thing with manhwa is it's written in color. So it's written in color and it's drawn in color and it's already with Solo Leveling specifically, it's already an adaptation of the light novel. So all you had to do was literally animate the manhwa. And it's
Just
one of
make
those.
it move and put music to it. That's really all you had to do, and you would have had an easy 8 out of 10. That's it.
Yeah, and I think the sad part of this is the fact that the way it is currently, I feel like it misses the mark with both people who have read the source material and anime-only watchers. It doesn't really satisfy either party because the people who know the source material are gonna more likely than not be like us and be like, "Why is all this extra stuff in here? This isn't relevant." And then if you're anime only, I feel like you're gonna be confused, like, "Who are all of these people? Where is this going?" Especially with where it ended at, because like I said, Arise was cool or whatever, but I felt like it should have been earlier on. So because once he gets his job change is when he really starts to level up and like kind of explore his powers and
Yeah.
it kind of becomes really interesting and you start to see that like, oh, he's really the protagonist,
Yeah, and
you know?
apparently there's supposed to be more episodes or whatever this year or whatever, so I think they're just taking a season off and then they're gonna air like another 12 episodes or whatever. But it's just like you didn't get start off on the right foot. So it's just like this story is great. It's been hyped up, rightly so, but then your adaptation made it less than what it was supposed to be.
Yeah. So hopefully the next episodes will fix it because I know that we aren't the only people who complained about the pacing and things like that. So hopefully, especially since it's, being funded by Crunchyroll, like Crunchyroll actually listens to their audience to a certain extent. So I don't know how much sway that has, but maybe hopefully it'll be better. And maybe taken together, it'll be a better experience. Cause like I said, it might be different when you're binging it and you're getting more than 20 minutes of content at a time. But, I'll withhold the verdict on that. For right now, like I said, for me, Solo Leveling is like a solid 5. It's not something that I would recommend to other people. It's not something that I would, like, be like, "Oh, I wanna go back and watch it," but it is something that I'm willing to give the next set of episodes a try.
Yeah, but and for me personally, I would say that's only because I read the source material.
Yeah, 100%. The source
Is it
material is carrying it, but I'm willing to see where they go with it.
And it's just I think it really just sucks for a story that you really like, but, I mean, I think we've covered everything that I really wanna cover about
Yeah,
Solo Leveling.
I don't think we can say much else about it without getting repetitive. But if you are listening to this, feel free to let us know what your opinions on solo leveling are. We would love to know if, we're in the majority or the minority with our opinions. But yeah, that is it for this episode of the I'd Rather Anime podcast. Thanks for tuning in and listening to us talk about solo leveling and sharing our thoughts, opinions, and banter. So, if you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure that you like it wherever you're listening to it, share it with someone that you think may enjoy it, and, check out our socials. We're I'd Rather Anime on Twitter. Technically, we're on Instagram, but,
You
don't
might be
hold your breath
watching
on
us
that.
on YouTube, that's a possibility.
Yeah. So we are planning to drop some more episodes. So stay tuned. But until then, you guys, thanks for listening. And until next time, we know that you'd rather anime with us.
Peace.